The poor cleaner's 8-year-old daughter answers an 866 meters Arabic call, shocking the millionaire. What he does will break your heart. Before we get into the topic, if this video reached you at the right moment, let us know with a simple comment. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content that connects with you. The mid-morning sunlight slanted through the windows of the Davidson Tower penthouse as Nancy Rodriguez wiped sweat from her brow. 6 hours into her shift, her hands were red and raw from the industrial cleaning products. At 42, her body complained more each year, but she couldn't afford to slow down, not with Emma's tutoring bills to pay. "Miss Rodriguez, where are those files I asked for?" Nancy flinched at Mr. Davidson's sharp tone. The billionaire investment broker stood in his office doorway, his tailored Italian suit worth more than her yearly salary. "Sir, I'm the cleaning lady. Your assistant stepped out for coffee." Robert Davidson glanced at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Right. Well, when she returns, tell her I need the Alfarsi portfolio immediately." Nancy nodded, returning to scrubbing the marble floors. The penthouse offices of Davidson International gleamed with wealth. Crystal chandeliers, gold-framed artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. It was another world from her cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, where she and Emma survived on her multiple cleaning jobs. The elevator chimed, and Nancy's heart skipped. Emma appeared, clutching her worn backpack. "Mama, school let out early. Water pipe broke." The 8-year-old bounded toward her, dark pigtails bouncing. "Emma, shh," Nancy whispered, glancing nervously at Davidson's office. "You know you shouldn't come here." "But Miss Wilson dropped me off. She said it was on her way." Nancy sighed. Her neighbor meant well, but one complaint from Davidson and Nancy could lose this job. "Stay quiet and sit in the break room until I finish, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly, but her wide brown eyes were already wandering across the luxurious office. Nancy returned to her work, scrubbing faster. Just 30 more minutes and they could leave. Then the phone rang. Not the regular office line, but the special red phone on Davidson's desk. The private line for his most important clients. "Where is everyone?" Davidson bellowed from the conference room. Nancy glanced at the empty reception area. Davidson's assistant was still out, and his partners had left for lunch. The phone continued its insistent ring. "Emma, don't touch anything," Nancy warned, hurrying to tell Davidson about the call. But before she could reach the conference room, Emma had picked up the red phone. "Davidson International, how may I help you?" the little girl said in perfect professional English. Nancy froze in horror. That line was reserved for billionaire clients and royal investors. Davidson would fire her on the spot. Then something extraordinary happened. Emma's expression changed, and she began speaking fluent Arabic. "Naam, Sayyid Al-Farsi. Assalamu alaikum. Kaifa haluka?" Emma continued confidently, nodding as if she'd been conducting international business her entire life. Nancy stood paralyzed as Robert Davidson emerged from the conference room, his face contorting in shock and fury at seeing a child on his private line. He lunged toward Emma, but then stopped abruptly when he heard her speaking. Emma switched seamlessly to English. "Mr. Davidson is unavailable at this moment, but I'd be happy to take your information." She grabbed a notepad and began writing, then returned to Arabic. Davidson's expression transformed from anger to astonishment. He turned to Nancy, his mouth open but no words coming out. After several minutes, Emma said, "Shukran jazilan, Mr. Al-Farsi. Mr. Davidson will call you back personally within the hour. Ma salama." She hung up the phone and smiled brightly. "Mama, that was Mr. Khalid Al-Farsi from Saudi Arabia. He says the deal is ready and the $866 million will be transferred once Mr. Davidson calls him back with the final approval codes." The color drained from Davidson's face as he stared at the 8-year-old girl in her faded jeans and unicorn t-shirt. "How?" he began, his voice barely a whisper. How does she know Arabic? Before Nancy could answer, Emma replied, Mama taught me. I know 7 languages now. Arabic, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Russian, Portuguese, and English, of course. She beamed with pride, unaware of the bombshell she'd just dropped. Davidson's gaze shifted to Nancy, seeing for the first time not a cleaning lady, but something else entirely, something that would change all their lives forever. You have 5 minutes to explain, he said. Nancy's hands trembled as she sat across from Robert Davidson in his private office. Emma waited outside with a tablet Davidson had given her, watching cartoons with oversized headphones. I'm sorry about the phone, Mr. Davidson. I'll pack my things, Nancy said, eyes downcast. That's not what I asked, Davidson replied, leaning forward. Your daughter just saved an $866 million deal with one of the most difficult investors in the Middle East. Khalid Al-Farsi has been wavering for weeks. My Arabic translator quit this morning without notice, and Al-Farsi refuses to speak English on principle. He paused. I want to know how an 8-year-old speaks perfect business Arabic, and apparently 6 other languages. Nancy exhaled slowly. She'd spent years hiding her past, protecting Emma from disappointment. I was a language specialist, Mr. Davidson. Before Emma, before. She gestured to her cleaning uniform. I have a master's degree in linguistics from Georgetown. I was working on my PhD when I got pregnant with Emma. Her father was my professor. When he discovered I was pregnant, he denied everything. I was dismissed from the program. Davidson's expression remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed slightly. With no degree, no recommendations, and a baby coming, I took whatever work I could find, but languages were my life, so I taught Emma from birth. She heard Spanish and English at home, Mandarin and French from recordings while she slept. By 4, she was fluent in 4 languages. By 6 languages. We added Arabic last year. Oh, and you ended up cleaning my office, Davidson said flatly. Nancy lifted her chin. I work 4 jobs, Mr. Davidson. I clean your office in the mornings, tutor high school students in the afternoons, translate documents freelance at night, and clean a medical office on weekends. Emma attends school on scholarship, but even with that, we barely make rent. Davidson was silent for a long moment, studying her. You're wasting your talents, Ms. Rodriguez. I'm surviving, Mr. Davidson, and making sure my daughter has opportunities I lost. Davidson stood abruptly and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The Manhattan skyline stretched before him, a testament to wealth and power. My Arabic translator quit because I refused his salary demands of $175,000 a year. I thought he was being unreasonable. He turned to face her. What's your hourly rate as a cleaner, Ms. Rodriguez? $15, she answered, confused by the shift. That's approximately $31,200 annually, assuming you work full-time, he calculated aloud. For someone with your skills, that's criminal. Nancy bristled. I don't need your pity, Mr. Davidson. Pity? He laughed without humor. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm a businessman. I recognize untapped assets when I see them. You and your daughter just demonstrated value to my company that far exceeds your current compensation. He returned to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. Janet, cancel my afternoon appointments and prepare an employment contract, and find out where Carmichael Academy has its admissions office. Nancy's pulse quickened. What are you doing? Making you an offer, effective immediately. You're no longer my cleaning lady. I want you as my chief multilingual communications specialist. Starting salary $200,000, with benefits and flexible hours so you can be there for Emma. Nancy's world tilted. That's not possible. I just watched your 8-year-old daughter charm Khalid Al-Farsi in his native tongue and save a deal worth $866 million. Nothing seems impossible anymore. His gaze intensified. But there's a condition. There always is, Nancy said cautiously. Emma needs proper education, not just language, but everything. Carmichael Academy is the best private school in Manhattan. They'll nurture her gifts. We can't afford. Davidson International will establish a scholarship for exceptionally gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds. His tone made it clear this wasn't charity, but investment. Why? Nancy asked, suspicion creeping in. Why would you do this? Davidson's expression hardened slightly. Because I recognize potential, Ms. Rodriguez. Your daughter has it, you have it, and I never waste potential. As Nancy struggled to process what was happening, Emma's voice came from the doorway. Mama, can I show Mr. Davidson something? They turned to see Emma standing there, holding a paper with complex characters drawn across it. I wrote down Mr. Al-Farsi's message in Arabic, she said proudly, walking to Davidson's desk. He said there was something important you should know about Mr. Sami. Davidson took the paper, his eyebrows rising as he read. This changes everything. How did you understand the business terminology? Emma shrugged. Mama has me practice with real business documents for her translation jobs. It's like a game. Davidson looked from Emma to Nancy, then back to the note. Ms. Rodriguez, I believe we have a great deal to discuss about your future and your daughters. The Carmichael Academy hallways gleamed with polished marble and old money. Framed photographs of famous alumni, senators, CEOs, and Pulitzer winners lined the oak-paneled walls. As Nancy walked beside Headmistress Winters, she felt painfully out of place in her one good pantsuit, purchased second-hand for job interviews. Carmichael rarely accepts mid-year transfers, Ms. Rodriguez, the headmistress said, her New England accent crisp. But Mr. Davidson's donation was persuasive. Nancy winced. 2 weeks had passed since the phone call incident, and everything had changed at dizzying speed. She now had an office at Davidson International with her name on the door, Nancy Rodriguez, Director of Multilingual Communications. Emma's test scores are certainly impressive, Headmistress Winters continued, but academic excellence is just one aspect of a Carmichael education. Our families typically have established backgrounds. The implication hung between them. People like you don't belong here. They stopped outside a classroom where Nancy could see Emma sitting at a desk, her second-hand clothes standing out among the uniformed children. We've placed her in our accelerated program, Headmistress Winters said. Though her language abilities are exceptional, we've found some concerning gaps in mathematics and sciences. Nancy bristled. She's advanced in both subjects. She helps me balance my checkbook. Yes, well, practical arithmetic differs from academic mathematics, and her social adjustment may be challenging. Our students come from similar backgrounds. They summer in the Hamptons, ski in Aspen. Their references and experiences are shared. Emma is adaptable, Nancy replied, her tone sharpening, and brilliant. We'll see, the headmistress said with a thin smile. Mr. Davidson has arranged for her uniform and supplies. They'll be delivered tomorrow. Until then, we'll make allowances for her. Current attire. Nancy bit her tongue. This was for Emma's future. She could endure condescension for that. Later that afternoon, Nancy sat in her new office, struggling to concentrate on translating investment documents. Her phone buzzed with a text from the school. Emma involved in incident. Please come immediately. Heart pounding, Nancy rushed to Carmichael. She found Emma sitting outside the headmistress's office, tear tracks on her cheeks. What happened, Mija? Nancy asked, kneeling beside her. I didn't do anything wrong, Mama, Emma whispered. Alexa said my shoes were from the garbage, and everyone laughed. Then during language class, when I corrected Mr. Benoit's French pronunciation, he got angry. Nancy sighed, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. The headmistress appeared, her expression severe. Ms. Rodriguez, while we appreciate Emma's linguistic abilities, challenging a teacher's authority is unacceptable at Carmichael. Did my daughter provide incorrect information? Nancy asked calmly. That's not the point. Furthermore, there was an altercation with another student over personal belongings. You mean when a girl mocked my daughter for not wearing designer shoes? Nancy's voice remained steady, though anger simmered beneath. The headmistress's lips thinned. Perhaps Carmichael isn't the right environment for Emma after all. Are you expelling my daughter on her first day? Nancy stood straighter, her professional demeanor falling into place. I wonder what Mr. Davidson would think, considering his substantial donation. The name worked its magic. The headmistress's expression shifted. Of course not. We simply need to establish appropriate behavioral expectations. As they left the office, Robert Davidson himself stood in the hallway, his imposing figure drawing stares from passing students. I received a call about some trouble, he said, eyes moving between Nancy and Emma. Everything's fine, Nancy assured him quickly. Too quickly. Davidson knelt to Emma's level. What happened, young lady? Emma hesitated, looking at her mother for permission. It's okay. Tell him, Nancy nodded. Some kids made fun of my shoes and clothes, Emma said softly, and the French teacher didn't like that I speak better French than him. Davidson's expression darkened momentarily, then cleared. He stood and placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. Intelligence often intimidates people, Emma. Remember that. He turned to Nancy. I have meetings near here all afternoon. Why don't I take Emma to get her school supplies now? Save you a trip. Nancy's protective instincts flared. That's not necessary. I insist. Davidson's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. She'll need everything immediately to fit in. The right supplies, the right clothes. I have an account at all the appropriate stores. Mr. Davidson, I appreciate everything you've done, but it's an investment in my company's future, Ms. Rodriguez. His tone was pleasant, but firm. Emma's education benefits us all. Before Nancy could protest further, Davidson added, We'll be back at the office by 5. You can focus on the Kuwaiti contracts without distraction. Emma looked up at Nancy with hopeful eyes. Please, Mama, I want to fit in tomorrow. Nancy reluctantly agreed, watching as Davidson led her daughter away. Something in the way he placed his hand on Emma's shoulder, possessive, triumphant, sent a chill through her. As they disappeared down the hallway, Nancy couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing control of something precious. As if, in gaining financial security, she was trading away something far more valuable. The Davidson International boardroom hummed with tension. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a thunderstorm brewing over Manhattan, mirroring the atmosphere inside. Nancy sat rigid in her new designer suit, heart hammering, as 12 executive board members stared at her presentation. 3 months had passed since Emma answered that fateful phone call. Nancy had transformed from cleaning lady to key executive, her linguistic expertise proving invaluable as Davidson International expanded its Middle Eastern portfolio. But success came with unexpected costs. Ms. Rodriguez, you're suggesting we restructure our entire approach to the Saudi market. Thomas Harrington, the silver-haired CFO, looked skeptical. Based on cultural nuances? Yes, Nancy replied firmly. Our current translation service is technically accurate, but culturally tone-deaf. It's costing us millions in delayed negotiations. Robert Davidson watched from the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Their relationship had evolved into something complex, part mentor, part employer, part something she couldn't quite define. His interest in Emma had only intensified with weekly mentoring sessions that made Nancy increasingly uneasy. The Al-Farsi group has specifically requested Ms. Rodriguez handle all communications moving forward, Davidson said, effectively ending debate. Their $866 million investment has already increased by 12% under her guidance. The executives nodded with new respect. Money spoke the only language they all understood. After the meeting, Davidson asked Nancy to stay behind. "Brilliant presentation," he said, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. "You've exceeded my expectations." "Thank you." Nancy accepted the glass but didn't drink. "Mr. Davidson, there's something we need to discuss about Emma." His expression shifted subtly. "Is there a problem at Carmichael?" "Not with her education. She's thriving academically." Nancy chose her words carefully, "But she mentioned you've discussed taking her to Saudi Arabia for the Al-Farsi negotiations next month." "She'd be an incredible asset," Davidson said smoothly. "Khalid adores her. Having a child prodigy as our cultural ambassador would give us an unbeatable advantage." "She's 8 years old, not an asset," Nancy said, setting down her untouched scotch, "and she needs to be in school, not international business meetings." Davidson's smile cooled. "Nancy, surely you understand what's at stake. The Al-Farsi deal could expand to billions. Emma's gift shouldn't be wasted in a classroom when she could be making history." "By making history, you mean making you money," Nancy replied, tension rising. "I'm grateful for everything you've done for us, but Emma's future is not negotiable." Davidson leaned back, studying her. "You know, when I first saw you scrubbing my floors, I never imagined you'd be sitting across from me in Armani, refusing a request." His tone was light, but his eyes were calculating. "Life changes quickly, doesn't it?" "Some things don't change," Nancy replied. "My priority has always been Emma's well-being." "And you think I don't have her best interests at heart?" Davidson spread his hands. "Look at everything I've provided. The best education, opportunities most children could never dream of. She has a future now." "She always had a future," Nancy said quietly. "Maybe not with wealth or privilege, but with love and integrity." Davidson's expression hardened. "Noble sentiments don't pay Carmichael's tuition or the mortgage on your new apartment." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "Think carefully about your position, Nancy. Everything in your new life exists because I recognize value and reward it accordingly. If Emma's linguistic gifts are no longer available to Davidson International, I would have to reconsider the company's investment in both of you." The threat hung in the air between them. Nancy felt a cold realization wash over her. The golden cage had been there all along. She just hadn't wanted to see the bars. "I need to pick up Emma," she said, rising. "We'll continue this discussion tomorrow." "Of course," Davidson smiled, all business again. "Oh, and Nancy, Emma mentioned she's learning Japanese now. Fascinating coincidence. We're exploring a major acquisition in Tokyo next quarter." As Nancy left the building, the storm broke overhead. She ducked into a coffee shop, hands shaking as she called her old friend Sophia, who'd warned her about Davidson's reputation. "He's using Emma," Nancy whispered into the phone. "I thought he was helping us, but he's just exploiting her talent." Sophia's response was gentle but firm. "You knew who he was, Nancy. Men like Davidson don't give without taking more in return. What do I do? We can't go back to how things were. Emma loves her school, our new home. For the first time, she has opportunities I always dreamed of giving her. The question is, what price are you willing to pay? And more importantly, what price will Emma pay?" As rain lashed the windows, Nancy made a decision. She would find a way to break free from Davidson's influence without sacrificing Emma's future. She just needed time and a plan. Across town, in Davidson's penthouse office, the billionaire made a phone call. "I need information on Nancy Rodriguez's past," he told his private investigator. "Something tells me our miraculous linguist is hiding something that might help me secure her daughter's extraordinary talents permanently." Cherry blossoms drifted across the Carmichael Academy courtyard as parents gathered for the spring showcase. 5 months had passed since Emma had answered that life-changing phone call, and outwardly, everything was perfect. Nancy sat in the front row, her designer dress and carefully styled hair making her indistinguishable from the wealthy mothers around her, at least on the surface. On stage, Emma stood confidently before the assembled parents and administrators. At just 8 years old, she'd become something of a celebrity at Carmichael. Today, she would demonstrate her linguistic abilities by giving the same welcome speech in all 7 languages she knew. My journey began with my mother's voice. Emma started in English, her clear voice carrying across the auditorium. She taught me that languages are bridges between worlds. As Emma transitioned seamlessly into Spanish, then French, then Mandarin, Nancy felt pride swell within her chest, but mingled with that pride was fear. During the past months, Robert Davidson's influence over their lives had grown increasingly controlling. He sat beside Nancy now, applauding enthusiastically as Emma completed her Arabic portion. To everyone else, he appeared the generous benefactor, the visionary who discovered a prodigy from humble beginnings. Only Nancy saw the calculation behind his smiles, the way his eyes tracked Emma like a valuable acquisition. "She's remarkable," Davidson whispered. "The Kuwaiti ambassador asked specifically if she could join our meeting next week." "She has exams," Nancy replied quietly. "I've spoken with Headmistress Winters. It's arranged." Nancy's hands tightened in her lap. This was their new normal. Davidson making decisions about Emma's life, manipulating circumstances so Nancy's objections became moot. After the showcase, a reception was held in the school's grand hall. Wealthy parents swarmed around Emma, asking her to say phrases in different languages, treating her like an exotic exhibit. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Nancy turned to find Headmistress Winters, approaching with an elegant woman in her 60s. "This is Margaret Whitmore, head of the Global Youth Initiative. She's very interested in Emma's gifts." The woman extended a manicured hand. "Your daughter is extraordinary. We identify exceptional children worldwide for specialized education. Our program would provide Emma with opportunities beyond even Carmichael's resources." Nancy smiled politely. "That's very kind, but Emma is thriving here." "The program is quite selective," Margaret continued. "Only 12 children worldwide are chosen annually. They study at our campus in Switzerland with the world's leading experts in their fields." Switzerland, thousands of miles away. Nancy's suspicion flared. "Did Mr. Davidson introduce you to Emma's case?" Margaret's smile flickered. "He's one of our most generous donors. When he mentioned Emma's abilities, we were naturally interested." Of course, another of Davidson's chess moves, positioning Emma further from Nancy's influence. "I appreciate the opportunity," Nancy said carefully, "but Emma is only 8. She belongs with her mother." "The program begins at age 9, Margaret replied. "We understand family bonds, but exceptional children have exceptional needs. Our campus includes family accommodations for periodic visits." Periodic visits. The words chilled Nancy to her core. "I'll need to think about it," she said, already knowing her answer. Later, as Nancy and Emma prepared to leave, Davidson intercepted them by the entrance. "The Whitmores are hosting a dinner tonight at the Pierre," he said. "Emma should meet their son William. He attended the Swiss program and now studies at MIT, at 14. "We have plans," Nancy lied. "Cancel them," Davidson said, his tone pleasant but firm. "This is important for Emma's future. The application deadline for next year's cohort is approaching." "I haven't agreed to any Swiss program," Nancy replied, keeping her voice low despite her rising anger. Davidson's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. "Nancy, be reasonable. This is an unparalleled opportunity. Most parents would sacrifice anything for such a chance." "That's just it," Nancy said. "I won't sacrifice my relationship with my daughter for any opportunity, no matter how prestigious." Davidson placed a hand on her arm, guiding her slightly away from nearby parents. "Your dedication is admirable, but potentially misguided. Emma's gifts could change the world, but only with proper development. She's a child, not a corporate asset to be developed," Nancy hissed. "Of course, But children grow up. The question is, into what? His grip tightened slightly. Into someone extraordinary with global influence, or someone limited by a mother's fear of letting go. The accusation stung. Nancy pulled her arm away. This conversation is over. Emma and I are going home. Ms. Rodriguez, Davidson's voice dropped, remember your position. The scholarship, your job, the apartment, all can be reassessed if you're not making decisions in Emma's best interest. Before Nancy could respond, Emma appeared at her side, still glowing from her success. Mama, can we get ice cream to celebrate? Nancy forced a smile. Of course, Mija. Davidson knelt to Emma's level. How would you like to have dinner with me tonight? At a fancy hotel with important people who want to meet you. They have a special school in Switzerland where children like you learn amazing things. Emma's eyes widened. Like Hogwarts? Davidson chuckled. Even better. And I've heard their ice cream is magnificent. Emma looked up at Nancy, excitement evident. Can we go, Mama? Trapped, Nancy nodded, watching as Davidson's mask of benevolence slipped back into place. She needed to act soon, before his influence over Emma grew stronger, before Switzerland became a reality. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Nancy made a phone call to Miguel Ortiz, a former colleague from her linguistics days who now worked at the United Nations. I need a way out, Miguel, she whispered. Davidson is trying to separate me from Emma. I need another option, a job where my skills matter, but Emma stays with me. The UN has an opening in the translation department, Miguel replied. The pay won't match Davidson's, but there's a school for diplomats' children with an excellent language program. When can I interview? Next week. But Nancy, be careful. Men like Davidson don't let valuable assets walk away easily. As she hung up, Nancy glanced at Emma's peacefully sleeping form. Whatever came next, they would face it together. No golden cage was worth the price of her daughter's freedom, or her own. The manila envelope arrived at Nancy's apartment on a Tuesday morning, delivered by private courier. No return address, just her name typed on a plain label. Inside was a single photograph. Nancy, 9 years younger, standing outside Georgetown University with Professor James Harlow, Emma's father. A yellow sticky note bore a handwritten message. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office. Come alone, R.D. Nancy's hands trembled as she stuffed the envelope into her purse. Davidson had found Harlow. After 9 years of protecting Emma from the truth about her father's rejection, Davidson had unearthed her most painful secret. In his penthouse office the next day, Davidson sat behind his massive desk, morning sunlight casting his features in sharp relief. He didn't rise when Nancy entered, just gestured to the chair across from him. Professor James Harlow, Davidson said, sliding a file toward her. Currently Dean of Linguistics at Cambridge University. Married to Helena Harlow, daughter of British media magnate William Templeton. 2 children, officially. Nancy remained silent, her face carefully neutral despite the churning in her stomach. Harlow's biography conveniently omits his time at Georgetown, Davidson continued, or his affair with a brilliant graduate student named Nancy Rodriguez, or the daughter that resulted from that affair. What do you want, Robert? Nancy asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The UN Translation Department. Really, Nancy? Davidson's smile was cold. Did you think I wouldn't know about your interview next week? Of course he knew. Davidson's network of influence seemed limitless. This is about control, Nancy said. You can't stand that I won't let you turn Emma into your personal corporate asset. This is about potential, Davidson countered. Emma could have everything, the finest education, connections to world leaders, a future beyond anything you could provide on a UN translator's salary. With the small price of being separated from her mother and manipulated by you. Davidson leaned forward. I'm offering you a choice. Option 1. The Switzerland Program. You'll receive a generous compensation package and visitation rights. Emma gets world-class opportunities. Visitation rights to my own daughter. Nancy's voice rose. That's not a choice. Option 2 is less pleasant, Davidson continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Professor Harlow's reputation, marriage and career depend on his carefully constructed image. This file contains DNA evidence of Emma's paternity, plus documentation of how Harlow abused his position with a student, then engineered her dismissal when she became pregnant. Nancy's blood ran cold. You'd destroy him. I'd expose the truth, Davidson corrected, unless he asserts his parental rights and enrolls Emma in the Switzerland program himself. With his family connections, he'd easily gain custody of a child you've kept from him for 8 years. That's not what happened, Nancy whispered. It's his word against yours. A distinguished dean versus a former cleaning lady. Davidson's eyes were pitiless. Who do you think the courts will believe? Nancy's mind raced. Davidson had orchestrated everything from the beginning. The job offer, Carmichael Academy, the accidental meeting with the Swiss program director, all to separate her from Emma. Why? She asked finally. Why Emma? There are other linguistic prodigies. None like Emma, Davidson replied. Her abilities are unprecedented. 7 languages perfectly spoken at 8 years old. She can become anything, a diplomat, an intelligence asset, a corporate negotiator worth billions, but only with the right guidance. Your guidance, Nancy said bitterly. I recognize her potential because I lived it, Davidson said, his voice softening slightly. I was discovered by a businessman who saw past my circumstances. I grew up in the Bronx, Nancy. Foster care. No one wanted me until Jeremiah Davidson recognized my aptitude for numbers and languages. For the first time, Nancy glimpsed something genuine in him, a reflection of his own past in Emma's present. He adopted me, gave me his name, his opportunities. Without him, I'd have been nothing. I'm offering Emma the same chance. There's a difference, Nancy said quietly. Jeremiah Davidson saved an unwanted child from foster care. You're trying to take a loved child from her mother. Something flickered across Davidson's face, doubt, perhaps, or a moment of recognition. You have 1 week to decide, he said finally. Switzerland with your blessing and involvement, or a custody battle you'll lose. Nancy stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Except one thing. And what's that? Emma, you've calculated every adult's response, manipulated every circumstance. But Emma is not a pawn, Robert. She's a person, with her own mind and heart. She's a child who'll follow the path set by adults, Davidson replied dismissively. Nancy reached for the door, then paused. Did you ever resent him, Jeremiah, for deciding your life's direction? The question caught Davidson off guard. For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing something wounded beneath. He saved me, Davidson said, but there was a hollowness to the words. At what cost? Nancy asked softly, then left without waiting for an answer. Outside, Manhattan's streets pulsed with midday activity. Nancy walked aimlessly, her mind whirling with impossible choices. She couldn't fight Davidson's legal machine, couldn't bear to see Emma taken by a father who'd rejected her before birth. Couldn't accept Switzerland and periodic visitation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmichael Academy. Please come immediately. Incident involving Emma. Nancy's heart lurched as she hailed a taxi. At the school, she found Emma sitting outside the headmistress's office, clutching something in her small hands. What happened, Miha? Nancy asked, kneeling beside her. Emma opened her hands to reveal a beautiful enameled music box. Mr. Davidson gave me this yesterday. It plays a song when you open it. I brought it for show and tell, but when I opened it in class, it started playing a recording of me speaking all my languages instead of music. Everyone was impressed, but then Headmistress Winters got really angry and took it away. Nancy felt ice in her veins. A recording? The headmistress appeared, her expression grave. Ms. Rodriguez, this device contains sophisticated recording technology disguised as a child's trinket. It's been recording everything said in its vicinity and transmitting the data externally. This is a serious violation of privacy laws and school policy. She handed Nancy a business card. This was inside the mechanism. Perhaps you can explain. The card belonged to Margaret Whitmore of the Global Youth Initiative, the Swiss program. Suddenly everything clicked into place. Davidson wasn't just separating Emma from Nancy, he was documenting Emma's abilities for the program application, using her as an unwitting demonstration subject. "Where is the music box now?" Nancy asked. "Our IT department is examining it. We're considering involving authorities." As the headmistress continued about privacy violations, Nancy's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Khalid Al-Farsi requests meeting. Concerns Davidson. Plaza Hotel, 4 p.m. today. Nancy stared at the message. Khalid Al-Farsi, the Saudi businessman whose call Emma had answered months ago. The catalyst for everything that followed. For the first time since the envelope arrived that morning, Nancy felt something beyond fear and despair. She felt a glimmer of hope. "Headmistress Winters, I need to take Emma home now, and I'd like that music box as evidence." Something in Nancy's tone must have conveyed the severity of the situation, because the headmistress simply nodded. As they left Carmichael Academy, Emma looked up at her mother. "Are we in trouble, Mama?" Nancy squeezed her daughter's hand. "No, mija, but we need to be very brave now. We're going to meet someone who might help us." "Who?" "Mr. Al-Farsi, the man you spoke Arabic with on the red phone. Do you remember?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I remember everything, Mama." "Good," Nancy said, raising her hand to hail a taxi, "because it's time for both of us to use everything we know." The Plaza Hotel's opulence seemed to exist in another universe from Nancy's former life. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors while uniformed staff moved with practiced discretion. Emma gripped her mother's hand tightly as they were escorted to a private suite. "Remember, Mija, speak only when spoken to," Nancy whispered. "Mr. Al-Farsi is a very important man." The suite doors opened to reveal Khalid Al-Farsi, tall and distinguished in his traditional thobe, with silver-streaked beard and penetrating eyes. "Ms. Rodriguez," Al-Farsi's accent was mild, his English perfect, "and the remarkable Emma, thank you for coming." As they sat, Al-Farsi studied Emma with undisguised interest. "You are even younger than I imagined on the telephone. 7 languages at 8 years old. Extraordinary." "Thank you, sir," Emma replied in flawless Arabic. Al-Farsi smiled, switching back to English. "A wise woman, your mother." He turned to Nancy. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'll be direct. Robert Davidson contacted me about investing in a Swiss educational program. He specifically mentioned Emma as its star recruit, with himself as her legal guardian." Nancy's breath caught. "He has no right—" "I'm aware," Al-Farsi interrupted gently. "My investigators are thorough. Davidson's behavior concerned me, so I made inquiries." He handed Nancy a folder containing photographs of Davidson meeting with Professor Harlow and Margaret Whitmore, plus legal documents outlining custody transfer procedures. "He's been planning this for months," Nancy whispered. "Since the day Emma answered his phone," Al-Farsi confirmed. "The $866 million deal was genuine, but your daughter's intervention provided Davidson something he values more than money: control over a truly extraordinary asset." "Emma is not an asset," Nancy said sharply. "To you, she is a daughter. To Davidson, he collects potential. It's how he built his empire, finding exceptional talent and binding it to him through debt, gratitude, or legal obligation. Like he tried with me, Nancy realized. The job, the apartment, the school, all creating dependency. Davidson miscalculated with you. He assumed financial need would override maternal instinct. What does he want with Emma? Nancy asked. The Global Youth Initiative appears educational, but functions primarily as a talent pipeline for governments and corporations. Its graduates emerge with unbreakable loyalty to their sponsors. Davidson himself was one such recruit decades ago. Emma spoke up. Is Mr. Davidson a bad man? Al-Farsi considered the question seriously. No, child. He believes he offers opportunity, but his version requires surrendering your freedom to choose your own path. Why are you helping us? Nancy asked. You're Davidson's business partner. I was raised with 7 sisters. Family bonds are sacred in my culture. What Davidson proposes violates principles I hold dear. Al-Farsi leaned forward. I propose an alternative. My foundation needs someone to coordinate translation services, someone with your qualifications. Nancy blinked. You're offering me a job. With appropriate compensation, flexible hours, and access to an international school in London where Emma's gifts would be nurtured alongside children of diplomats. No separation, no Switzerland. What about Davidson? He won't simply let us go. Al-Farsi smiled. Leave Davidson to me, his recording device on Emma. Corporate espionage carries serious penalties. The music box, Emma whispered. Indeed, most unfortunate it recorded his own incriminating conversations as well. Al-Farsi produced a flash drive. You have 24 hours to decide. If you accept, a private jet will depart for London tomorrow evening. As they left, Emma chattering excitedly about London, Nancy's phone buzzed with a text from Davidson. My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow, final decision time. The next morning dawned grey and rainy as Nancy rode the elevator to Davidson's penthouse office. Emma was safely with Sophia, unaware that today would determine her future. Davidson stood at his window, watching rain lash against the glass. He didn't turn when Nancy entered. You missed the emergency board meeting this morning, he said. Khalid Al-Farsi has withdrawn all investments from Davidson International. $866 million gone overnight. I'm sorry to hear that, Nancy said, keeping her voice neutral. Davidson turned, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. Interesting coincidence. You meet with Al-Farsi, and suddenly my largest investor abandons a highly profitable partnership. Perhaps he discovered something that changed his mind. Like a recording device? Davidson's smile was cold. Yes, I know about your meeting. I know everything, Nancy. He tossed a legal document onto his desk. Custody papers, already filed with the court. Professor Harlow was remarkably cooperative once he understood the stakes. Nancy felt ice in her veins as she scanned the document. James Harlow was asserting paternity and seeking full custody of Emma, citing extraordinary educational needs and mother's interference with educational opportunities. You're a monster, she whispered. I'm a pragmatist, Davidson corrected. Emma's gifts are too valuable to waste. One day she'll thank me for ensuring her potential wasn't squandered. She'll hate you for separating her from her mother. Children adapt. I did. Davidson straightened his tie. The hearing is next week. Given Harlow's standing and the evidence of your interference with Emma's opportunities, I expect a swift resolution. Now, what about Al-Farsi's offer? London would provide everything you claim to want for Emma's education. Under Al-Farsi's influence, not mine. Davidson shook his head. Emma deserves the best. Nancy fought to control her panic. What if I convinced Al-Farsi to reinvest with certain conditions, a compromise? Davidson considered this. Interesting. What conditions? Emma remains with me. No Switzerland. Instead, she attends Carmichael with supplemental instruction. Alfarsi and Davidson International jointly fund her education. And what do I get in this arrangement? Legitimate access to Emma's linguistic abilities for appropriate business purposes. With my supervision and reasonable limitations, Davidson studied her calculatingly. Alfarsi's reinvestment would need to include penalties for early withdrawal, and I'd require documented involvement in Emma's educational planning. I'll speak with him today. Do that. Davidson checked his watch. I have a lunch meeting. If Alfarsi declines, the custody hearing proceeds as scheduled. Outside, rain soaked Nancy as she walked blindly through Midtown. She'd bought time, nothing more. Her phone rang. Alfarsi. Have you decided? He asked. Davidson knows everything. He's filed custody papers with Emma's biological father. This complicates matters but changes nothing. The offer stands. He'll fight us in court. Emma's father has status, connections, and a history he wishes to keep hidden, Alfarsi interjected. My investigators have been thorough. Professor Harlow's cooperation with Davidson was coerced. Given the right assurances, his position might shift. What assurances? Financial security for his legitimate family, discretion regarding his past, and no obligation to participate in his abandoned daughter's life beyond legal documentation. Later, Nancy received a package from Margaret Whitmore containing evidence of the Swiss program's true purpose, creating specialized assets with linguistic and cognitive conditioning. Children separated from families and molded into valuable intelligence and corporate tools. A final video showed Whitmore herself. Ms. Rodriguez, I joined the initiative believing we served gifted children. The truth is darker. Save your daughter. Run. Nancy's phone buzzed with a text from Alfarsi. Harlow has withdrawn the custody petition. Legal documentation confirmed. The way is clear. She glanced at the clock, 3:47 p.m., just over 3 hours until the plane departed. Enough time to collect Emma from Sophia's, grab their emergency bags, and escape. London greeted them with typical English drizzle and the promise of a fresh start. Alfarsi had arranged a comfortable flat in South Kensington, walking distance from the International Academy, where Emma would begin classes the following week. 3 days had passed since their hasty departure from New York, and their new life was just beginning to sink in. Mama, look! Is that our new home? Emma pressed her face against the taxi window as they pulled up to a charming Victorian townhouse, its brick facade softened by climbing ivy. Yes, mija. Nancy smiled, though anxiety still knotted her stomach. Davidson's reach was long, and his anger at their escape would be formidable. Their flat occupied the building's second floor, high ceilings and tall windows that filled the space with soft grey light. Modern furniture mixed with vintage pieces, creating a warm atmosphere miles away from the sterile luxury of their Manhattan apartment. It's perfect, Emma whispered, running from room to room with excitement. And is that my school uniform? She pointed to a navy blazer hanging on a bedroom door. You start Monday, Nancy confirmed. The school has children from 30 different countries. You'll have language clubs, cultural exchange programs, and friends who won't make fun of me for knowing too much? Emma asked hopefully. Nancy's heart squeezed. Exactly. Being multilingual is normal there. Celebrated even. As Nancy's phone rang with Alfarsi's number, she answered immediately. You're settled? He asked without preamble. Yes, thank you. Emma's thrilled about school. Excellent. Your position at the Linguistic Heritage Foundation begins tomorrow. My assistant will collect you at 9. His tone softened. And Ms. Rodriguez? Davidson has made inquiries in London. Nancy's breath caught. He's looking for us already. As expected, but your documentation lists you as Nancy Vega, a Brazilian-American specialist recruited from São Paulo. Emma is enrolled as Emma Vega. Different paper trail. Will it be enough? combined with legal warnings about harassment and the evidence we possess regarding his recording devices? Yes. Davidson is ambitious, not foolish. The next morning, Al-Farsi's assistant, a brisk Englishwoman named Penelope, escorted Nancy to the Foundation's headquarters near Regent's Park. As multilingual communications director, Nancy would coordinate between field researchers and translation teams, beginning with indigenous languages of the Amazon basin. Meanwhile, Emma flourished at the International Academy. Unlike Carmichael's rigid hierarchy, the Academy embraced diversity. Emma's linguistic abilities earned admiration rather than resentment, and she came home chattering about friends rather than isolation. 3 weeks into their London life, Nancy received an unexpected visitor at the Foundation. She looked up to find Khalid Al-Farsi himself standing in her office doorway. "I'm in London briefly and wanted to see how you're adjusting," he explained. After discussing her work, Nancy asked directly, "Why did you really help us, Mr. Al-Farsi?" If the question surprised him, he didn't show it. "Several reasons. The practical, Davidson's methods concern me. Business requires trust, and men who view people as commodities eventually extend that view to everything." And the personal reasons? 30 years ago, I had a daughter with extraordinary mathematical abilities. My family wished her to attend a special program in Switzerland, the predecessor to Davidson's initiative. Nancy's pulse quickened. What happened? I was young, ambitious, easily convinced by promises of exceptional opportunity. I allowed them to take her. His eyes darkened. 2 years later, they returned a different child. Technically brilliant, but emotionally damaged. The connection between us was severed. She works now for a technology firm in Singapore, calls dutifully on holidays, but remains a stranger. "I'm so sorry," Nancy whispered. "When I heard Emma on that phone call, then discovered Davidson's interest in her, I recognized history preparing to repeat itself. You're protecting Emma from your daughter's fate. I'm offering the choice I should have made 3 decades ago, nurturing exceptional abilities without destroying the child who possesses them." 6 months passed in London, bringing crisp autumn, then winter, and finally the first hesitant signs of spring. The Rodriguez women, now officially the Vegas, had settled into rhythms that felt remarkably normal. Nancy's work at the Linguistic Heritage Foundation had expanded to include developing a revolutionary translation algorithm. Emma, now 9, had become one of the International Academy's star pupils, adding Hindi and Japanese to her linguistic repertoire. Davidson had returned to New York after his failed London fundraising venture, his Swiss program jeopardized by mysterious leaks about its true nature. Financial News reported Davidson International struggling with investor concerns and regulatory inquiries about corporate espionage. One morning, Penelope appeared in Nancy's doorway, her typically unflappable demeanor slightly disturbed. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Before Nancy could respond, a woman appeared, elegantly dressed, mid-30s, with striking features that combined Asian and European ancestry. "Ms. Rodriguez," the woman said, using Nancy's real name deliberately, "I'm Sophia Davidson. We need to talk." Nancy's blood ran cold. Davidson's daughter. Once they were alone, Sophia took a seat without waiting for invitation. "You've caused quite the upheaval in my father's life." "Your father tried to take my child," Nancy replied evenly. "Yes, he did. My father's methods have always been problematic, especially regarding gifted children. Why are you here? How did you find me?" "And finding you wasn't difficult. Father keeps meticulous records of his obsessions." Sophia placed a portfolio on Nancy's desk. "I'm trying to prevent a tragedy. My father is dying." "Dying? Pancreatic cancer, terminal, 3 months, perhaps 4. He was diagnosed shortly after you left New York. The prognosis was immediately clear, but he refused to accept it. Nancy felt strangely hollow. I'm sorry for your family, but I don't see how this concerns Emma and me. My father's illness has intensified certain fixations. He speaks of Emma constantly, reviews her files, watches recordings of her speaking different languages. He's convinced she represents his most important legacy. He's still trying to find her. In his more lucid moments, he understands that pursuit is futile, but as the illness progresses, his obsession grows. Sophia opened the portfolio, revealing legal documents barring Davidson from contact with Nancy or Emma, and establishing trusts for Emma's education. Why would he agree to this? Nancy asked. He hasn't. But as his health deteriorates, I've assumed control of Davidson International. These agreements, once signed, will be binding regardless of my father's objections. You're acting against your father's wishes. I'm acting to preserve what remains of his legacy and protect an innocent child from his fixation. Sophia hesitated. I was once in a similar program, in Geneva, not Zurich, but the same approach. You were separated from your family? My mother died when I was 7. Father was building his empire and believed the program offered superior opportunities. Her voice remained steady, but something haunted flickered in her eyes. I was 12 when I returned to New York. Academically advanced, fluent in 5 languages, and completely estranged from my father. I'm sorry, Nancy said softly. With Emma, something different is happening. He sees himself in her story, the gifted child from humble beginnings. He believes he's offering the salvation Jeremiah Davidson once offered him. By destroying her relationship with her mother, Nancy said. Precisely. In his mind, it's a necessary sacrifice for greater opportunity. Sophia tapped the documents. These ensure that fantasy can never become reality, regardless of what happens with his illness. Cherry blossoms floated on spring breezes across London's parks as Nancy walked home from the foundation. 2 years had passed since their escape from New York, since Davidson's daughter had appeared with legal documents ensuring their safety. In that time, Nancy had confirmed through discreet channels that Robert Davidson had indeed died 8 months after Sophia's visit. Life had settled into comfortable patterns. Nancy's translation algorithm had revolutionized the Foundation's work, earning her professional recognition she'd once thought forever lost. At 11, Emma was thriving at the International Academy, her linguistic abilities now encompassing 10 languages. They had built a good life, secure, fulfilling, with opportunities neither had dared imagine during their struggling New York days, which made the message on Nancy's phone all the more unsettling. Urgent meeting requested. Plaza Hotel, London, tomorrow, 2 p.m. K.A. The next day, Nancy entered the Plaza's elegant lobby with a sense of déjà vu. Al-Farsi waited in a private salon, looking older than she remembered, still distinguished, but with deeper lines around his eyes. Ms. Rodriguez, he greeted her. Thank you for coming. Your message sounded urgent, Nancy replied, taking a seat across from him. Indeed. Al-Farsi waited until they were alone before continuing. The Swiss program Davidson championed, it continues, despite his death and the scandals that surrounded it. Nancy felt a cold weight in her stomach. How is that possible? The program has relocated, rebranded, with new financial backers. They still recruit exceptional children worldwide. They've identified another linguistically gifted child in Mumbai, 8 years old, fluent in 6 languages. Nancy's pulse quickened. You want to intervene as you did with Emma? Yes, but I need your help. How? The child's parents are skeptical but tempted by the program's promises. They're educated people with limited resources, much like you were. And you want me to share my experience, the reality behind the promises? Yes, your story could be powerful testimony. Nancy considered the request carefully. For 2 years, she'd focused on building their new life, deliberately avoiding thoughts of Davidson and the Swiss program. The child's name is Priya, Al-Farsi added quietly. She reminds me very much of Emma at that age. The name struck Nancy like a physical blow. Priya, like Emma's friend from school? The same. Your daughter befriended Priya Sharma during a cultural exchange last term. Emma taught her Japanese origami. Priya taught Emma Hindi songs. The program identified Priya through that exchange. Emma's friendship inadvertently brought her to their attention. Oh, God, Nancy whispered, horrified. Emma will blame herself if Priya disappears into that program, which is why we must prevent it. Al-Farsi's tone was gentle but firm. The Sharma family arrives in London tomorrow for a preliminary assessment at what they believe is a prestigious academy. In reality, it's the first step in separation. Nancy agreed to meet the Sharmas, telling them her story, from cleaning Davidson's office to Emma answering the Arabic call, from the initial opportunities to the gradual revelation of Davidson's true intentions. She explained the Swiss program's history of separating gifted children from families, the emotional conditioning designed to transfer attachment from parents to institutional loyalty. The Sharmas listened with increasing concern, their initial politeness giving way to pointed questions. By the meeting's end, they had cancelled their assessment appointment and were exploring alternative options, including the international academy Emma attended. Will the program recruiters simply move on to another child? Nancy asked Al-Farsi later. Perhaps, but each intervention creates difficulty for them, exposes their methods, forces them to work harder to hide their true purpose. Al-Farsi's tone grew thoughtful. Change happens gradually, Ms. Rodriguez. One family, one child at a time. Sunlight streamed through tall windows as Nancy organized papers on her desk, preparing for the Foundation's annual conference. 5 years had passed since their escape from New York, since Davidson's attempt to separate her from Emma. In that time, their London life had evolved from temporary refuge to permanent home. Emma, now 13, had blossomed into a remarkably balanced teenager despite her extraordinary abilities. With 12 languages in her repertoire, she had become the youngest ever student ambassador for the International Academy's Cultural Exchange Program. Nancy's work at the Linguistic Heritage Foundation had expanded dramatically, her translation algorithm earning international recognition. Life had stabilized, wounds had healed, and the shadows of their past had receded, until today's email arrived from Sophia Davidson. Estate matters finalized. Father's personal effects include items concerning E. Please advise regarding disposition. SD. Before Nancy could consider her response, her office phone rang. Ms. Vega, there's a young woman here insisting on seeing you. She doesn't have an appointment. Her name, Layla Al-Farsi. Nancy froze. Al-Farsi's daughter? The one he'd sent to the Swiss program 30 years ago? Send her in. Moments later, a striking woman in her 30s entered Nancy's office. Ms. Rodriguez, she said, using Nancy's original name deliberately. I'm Layla Al-Farsi. I know of you through your father, though we've never met. My father speaks highly of you and your daughter. He considers your case his most important intervention against the program. Your program, Nancy observed quietly. Yes. I spent 7 years in the Geneva iteration. Layla explained she and Sophia Davidson had been working together for 3 years, and that Davidson had kept extensive research on Emma's linguistic development. The items Davidson kept, their research. Extensive documentation of Emma's linguistic development, patterns your teaching methods established, theoretical frameworks based on her acquisition speed. He continued studying her even after we left. He became obsessed with understanding the source of her abilities. Not for exploitation, but genuine scientific inquiry. His illness changed him. Layla produced a tablet showing Davidson's final project, a comprehensive educational methodology for teaching multiple languages simultaneously to young children, based on the techniques Nancy used with Emma. He called it the Rodriguez method, Layla continued. It's designed to be implementable by any parent, regardless of economic resources. He named it after me. His notes indicate he came to believe the crucial element in Emma's development wasn't genetic predisposition or even your linguistic expertise. It was the emotional connection between you, the love and security that created optimal learning conditions. Layla and Sophia had been working to transform what remained of the program, preserving educational excellence while eliminating family separation. Davidson's research provided scientific foundation for their reforms. We want your participation, Ms. Rodriguez. Your expertise, your experience. We've identified another child with linguistic abilities similar to Emma's. Instead of separating him from his family, we want to implement the Rodriguez method with the family as primary facilitators. That evening, Nancy discussed the developments with Emma. To her surprise, Emma had researched Davidson herself the previous year. Mr. Davidson realized you were right all along, Emma observed, that separating kids from their parents was wrong. It seems so, yes. Then you should help them, Mama. If it helps other kids like that boy, or like Priya when those people tried to recruit her. You knew about Priya. She told me her parents almost sent her to a special school, but changed their minds after meeting Emma's mom. Emma smiled. I figured it out eventually. That's why we moved to London, isn't it? Because someone wanted to separate us. Nancy looked at her daughter, confident, balanced, compassionate despite her extraordinary abilities, and felt a wave of gratitude. Davidson had seen Emma's languages as assets to be developed. Nancy had seen them as bridges to understanding. Both perspectives held truth, but only one had preserved what mattered most, the connection between mother and daughter that had proven more powerful than any billionaire's influence. We've got options, Nancy agreed, smiling, and we'll face them together, just like always. Sir, if you give me $1 for bread, I'll give you something nobody else can. The tiny voice echoed through Richard Harrington's cavernous mansion, stopping him cold in his wheelchair. The little girl with tangled blonde hair and worn-out shoes stood unafraid, eyes full of impossible wisdom. But neither the paralyzed billionaire nor the desperate child could possibly imagine how a single dollar would change both their lives forever, forever. Before the story begins, wherever you are on your journey, consider this as encouragement to keep going. If this resonates with you, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiration. Get her out! How did a child get past security? Richard Harrington barked from his wheelchair. The little girl with the tattered pink backpack didn't flinch. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington. Margaret, his nurse, apologized. She just appeared. I'll call security right away. Richard's eyes narrowed at the small intruder. 6 years old, blonde hair in messy pigtails, wearing a dress that had seen better days. Her startlingly blue eyes looked straight at him without fear. Wait, he said, raising a hand. Something about this child's composure intrigued him. Who are you, and what are you doing in my house? I'm Lily Thompson, sir. I live with my mom in the apartments behind your wall. She pointed toward the window. There's a hole in your fence where the big tree fell last month. Richard made a mental note to have security check the perimeter. That doesn't explain why you're here, uninvited, he said, wheeling closer. The movement sent a familiar stab of pain through his useless legs. Lily stood her ground. I need $1, sir. A startled laugh escaped Richard's throat. $1? You break into a billionaire's home and ask for a single dollar? Why not 1,000? 1,000,000? Because I only need enough for bread, she replied simply. Mom's tip money doesn't come until tomorrow, and we're out of food today. Her directness silenced him momentarily. At 58, Richard had built TechVision into a global empire, survived a vicious divorce, and the car accident that severed his spinal cord, but he rarely encountered such unvarnished honesty. "And what do I get in return for this generous dollar?" he asked sarcastically. Without hesitation, Lily answered, "A miracle! I'll give you back the ability to walk." Margaret gasped. Richard's face darkened. "Get out," he said dangerously. "Get this delusional child out of my sight." But Lily didn't move. "You don't believe in miracles because you've never seen one, but that doesn't mean they aren't real. 3 surgeons from 3 different countries have told me I will never walk again," Richard spat. "My spine was crushed beyond repair." "Medicine can't fix everything," Lily interrupted. "Some things need different kinds of healing." Richard stared at her, fury battling with an inexplicable curiosity. "Margaret, give her $1 and escort her out, and call maintenance about that fence." Margaret quickly handed Lily a $1 bill, which she took carefully. "Thank you," Lily said. Then, looking directly at Richard, "I'll be back tomorrow to start your miracle." Before Richard could respond, Lily turned and walked toward the door, her small shoulders straight. "Don't bother coming back," Richard called after her, "and if you do, security will be waiting." The door closed with a soft click. Richard spun his wheelchair around. "Increase security patrols. I want that fence fixed today." "Yes, Mr. Harrington," Margaret said softly. Richard wheeled himself to the window, trying to ignore the strange feeling in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous, irrational hope. "Ridiculous," he muttered, crushing it down. But as he stared at his perfect, empty garden, he couldn't help wondering if Lily Thompson would indeed return. That evening, Richard found himself unusually restless. He browsed company reports and attempted to read a novel, activities that had failed to engage him since the accident. In his bedroom, he opened the bedside drawer and removed his grandfather's pocket watch. He wound it mechanically, though it had stopped keeping time years ago. He thought of the strange little girl and her absurd promise, a miracle, as if such things existed in a world where a single moment, a blown tire, a guardrail failure, could destroy everything. Security would ensure she wouldn't return. That was for the best. He had no time for childish fantasies. But as Richard drifted toward sleep, Lily's words echoed in his mind. "You don't believe in miracles because you've never seen one, but that doesn't mean they aren't real." The sleek black Bentley crawled through the rundown neighborhood. Inside, Detective Jack Reynolds reviewed his tablet while Richard gazed out the tinted windows. "This is it? Where Lily Thompson lives?" Richard asked, eyeing the dilapidated apartment complex. "Yes, sir. Unit 14B. Mother is Sarah Thompson, 32, single parent, works double shifts at Rosie's Diner. No father in the picture." Jack scrolled through his notes. "They moved to this building 6 months ago, though they've been in Portland for nearly 2 years. Richard frowned. The building was worse than he'd imagined. Peeling paint, broken concrete steps, a playground with equipment that looked like tetanus waiting to happen. "Criminal record?" Richard asked. "None for the mother. Clean as a whistle. Pays rent on time, despite the financial struggle. The girl, Lily, stellar reports from school. Teachers say she's unusually bright, empathetic." Richard nodded. He'd hired Jack the morning after Lily's unexpected visit, determined to learn everything about the child who'd breached his security. "Sir?" Jack cleared his throat. "May I ask why you're interested in this family?" Richard turned away from the window. "Just being thorough, Jack. When a child breaks into my home, I want to know who I'm dealing with." Jack nodded, unconvinced. "One more thing. Sarah Thompson worked for TechVision briefly, 3 years ago. Customer Service Department." Richard's head snapped up. "What? That wasn't in your initial report." "Just found it this morning. short employment, less than 6 months. Terminated during the mass layoffs after your accident. A familiar bitterness rose in Richard's throat. After his car crash, while he was still in the hospital, his partner Ben Cooper had initiated emergency restructuring. 500 employees cut. "Drive back," Richard ordered abruptly. "I've seen enough." As the Bentley pulled away, Richard caught a glimpse of a small figure in a pink jacket skipping toward the apartment building. Lily. Back at his mansion, Richard pulled up TechVision's personnel records. Sarah Thompson, hired January 2022, terminated June 2022. Excellent performance reviews. Reason for termination, company restructuring. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Harrington," Margaret said, "there's someone at the gate. Security wants to know if they should let her in." Richard knew without asking. "The Thompson girl?" Margaret nodded. Richard checked his watch. Almost exactly 24 hours since her last visit. "Let her in," he said finally. "But have security escort her directly to the sunroom and stay within earshot." 15 minutes later, Lily sat across from him, her feet dangling above the floor. Her clothes were cleaner today, her hair neatly braided. "You came back," Richard stated flatly. "I said I would," Lily replied. "I promised to give you a miracle. And I told you miracles don't exist." Lily tilted her head. "Have you ever seen the ocean, Mr. Harrington?" The non sequitur caught him off guard. "Of course I have." "What about someone who's never seen the ocean? If they don't believe it exists, does that make them right?" Richard's mouth twitched. "Clever analogy, but the ocean can be proven. Miracles cannot. I'm going to prove it to you." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a child's drawing. "This is for you." Richard reluctantly accepted the paper. It showed a crude drawing of a man standing, not in a wheelchair, beside a lighthouse. "What is this supposed to be?" "It's you. At the place where you proposed to Emma." Richard froze. "What did you say?" "The lighthouse at Cannon Beach, where you asked Emma to marry you 25 years ago." Cold dread washed over Richard. "How do you know about that?" No one knew about the lighthouse proposal except Emma. It had been their private moment. No photographer, no family present. Lily shrugged. "I just know things sometimes. Mom says I have good intuition." "Did your mother tell you to say this?" Richard demanded. "Is this some kind of extortion?" Lily looked genuinely confused. "What's extortion? Mr. Harrington, is everything all right?" Margaret called from outside. "Fine," he snapped. "Your mother worked for my company. Did you know that?" Lily nodded. "She answered phone calls from customers. She liked helping people. And she was fired. Is that why you're here? Some kind of revenge?" The little girl's eyes widened. "No, Mom doesn't even know I come here. She thinks I'm at my friend Madison's house after school." She leaned forward. "I'm here because you need help." Richard searched her face for deception, but found only sincerity. "You know things," he said finally. "Things you shouldn't know." "Yes." "Prove it. Tell me something else. Something no one could know." Lily thought for a moment. "You have a scar on your right knee from when you fell off your bike when you were 11. Your dad got really mad because you ruined your new pants." The hair on Richard's arm stood up. He had that scar, now hidden beneath the blanket covering his useless legs, and his father had indeed berated him about the pants. "One more," he whispered. "You keep your grandfather's pocket watch in your bedside drawer. You wind it every night, even though it stopped working years ago." Richard's breath caught. No one knew about his nightly ritual with the watch. "Who are you?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. "I'm just Lily," she said simply. "Can I come back tomorrow? I'll bring something to help you start walking again." Richard found himself nodding, his mind racing. "Good," Lily said, sliding off her chair. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Harrington." After she left, Richard sat motionless, the child's drawing clutched in his hand. The lighthouse was unmistakable, the same distinctive structure where he'd once knelt before Emma. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Emma, it's Richard. We need to talk." "I don't understand what you're asking me, Richard." Emma's voice came through the speaker. "Whether I've spoken to a child about our engagement? Of course not." Richard gripped his wheelchair. Emma had refused to meet in person, but he needed answers. "This girl knew about the lighthouse, Emma. She drew a picture of it." A pause. "And you think I told some random child about one of the few private moments of our marriage?" Someone told her. She knew other things too, personal things. "Such as," Richard hesitated, "my childhood, the pocket watch." "Richard," Emma's voice softened, "you've been isolated in that mansion for 3 years. Is it possible you're overreacting?" The suggestion stung because it carried truth. Since the accident, his world had shrunk to the walls of his mansion, his only contacts being Margaret, his physical therapist, and occasionally Ben, when company matters required his signature. "The girl's mother worked for Tech Vision," he said. "Sarah Thompson, do you remember her?" "How would I? I wasn't involved in the company for years before our divorce." Emma sighed. "Richard, what's this really about? You don't call me for 3 years, and suddenly you're fixated on some child who knows about a lighthouse." How could he explain that for the first time since waking up in the hospital to learn he would never walk again, he felt something other than bitter resignation? "She said she can make me walk again," he said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy. "Oh, Richard," Emma finally responded, her voice mixing pity and exasperation. "You know that's not possible. The specialists were very clear." "I know what they said," he snapped, then immediately regretted it. "I know, but this girl, she knows things, Emma. Have you spoken to Dr. Mitchell about this?" "I'm not delusional, if that's what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm concerned." "This doesn't sound like you. The Richard I knew was ruthlessly logical." "The Richard you knew could walk." Another long silence. "What do you want from me, Richard?" Emma asked finally. "Information. Has anyone been asking about me? About us?" "No, no one." Emma paused. "Does this child want money?" Richard thought of Lily's simple request for $1 to buy bread. No, at least, not beyond $1 for food. $1? Emma laughed, but it wasn't unkind. "Well, that's refreshing at least. Listen, I have a meeting. I suggest you talk to Dr. Mitchell about this interest you've developed." After hanging up, Richard sat in silence, staring at Lily's drawing. The lighthouse looked just as he remembered it, tall, white, with the distinctive red top. His phone buzzed with a text from Ben Cooper. "Board meeting next week. Your proxy vote needed. Documents being sent." Richard ignored it. In the 3 years since the accident, he'd allowed Ben to run Tech Vision with minimal interference. The company had been his life's work, but now it felt as distant as walking. On impulse, Richard opened the drawer containing his grandfather's pocket watch. How had Lily known? The watch had been in the drawer since before his accident. His computer chimed with an incoming email, the board documents from Ben. Richard opened the files automatically. Quarterly projections, acquisition proposals, executive compensation packages. He stopped, scrolling back. Ben was proposing another round of strategic workforce reductions, while simultaneously increasing executive bonuses by 25%. This despite Tech Vision posting record profits. For the first time in years, Richard felt a stirring of his old business instincts. This wasn't just standard corporate greed. Something felt off about these numbers. He began reading more carefully, noting discrepancies, questionable allocations. For 3 hours, he lost himself in financial statements, his analytical mind engaging in a way it hadn't since before the crash. When Margaret reminded him about dinner, Richard realized he'd skipped lunch, too absorbed in his investigation. "Margaret," he said, When the Thompson girl comes tomorrow, I'd like you to drive her home afterward. I want to know where she lives, who she talks to. Margaret looked uncomfortable. Sir, is that appropriate? I'm not asking you to follow her secretly. Just drive her home. Observe. I want to understand who's behind this. Behind what, sir? This. Whatever this is, someone must be feeding her information. Margaret's expression shifted to concern. Mr. Harrington, have you considered that this might just be a neighborhood child who's heard stories about you? She knew about a private moment between my ex-wife and me that happened 25 years ago. Richard interrupted sharply. She knew about a childhood injury and a family heirloom I keep in a locked drawer. That's not imagination, Margaret. That's something else. After she left, Richard returned to the financial documents, but his concentration had fractured. His thoughts kept returning to Lily Thompson and her impossible knowledge. Richard wheeled himself to the window, looking out at his vast, empty grounds. Somewhere beyond his property walls was a dilapidated apartment building where a little girl and her struggling mother lived. A girl who'd asked for just $1, and in return offered the impossible. For the first time in years, Richard Harrington found himself wondering, what if? Lily didn't come the next day, or the day after. By the third day, Richard found himself checking the security cameras with increasing frequency, irritated by the disappointment he felt each time they showed nothing but his empty driveway. Perhaps she's lost interest, Margaret suggested gently. Children often do. Richard grunted noncommittally, not wanting to admit how much Lily's absence bothered him. On the fourth day, as Richard was reviewing more of TechVision's financial records, he'd found several troubling discrepancies. Margaret appeared at his study door with an unusually serious expression. Mr. Harrington, there's a woman at the gate insisting on seeing you, Sarah Thompson. She says it's about her daughter. Richard's heart rate quickened. Let her in. 10 minutes later, Sarah Thompson stood before him in his living room. She was younger than Richard had expected, early 30s at most, with the same blonde hair as her daughter, though hers was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a waitress uniform with Rosie's Diner embroidered on the pocket. Mr. Harrington, she began without preamble, I need to know why my daughter has been coming to your house. Richard studied her carefully. I was about to ask you the same question, Ms. Thompson. Your daughter appeared unannounced on my doorstep 5 days ago, asking for $1. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. I was afraid of this. Mr. Harrington, I'm so sorry for any inconvenience Lily has caused. She's not like other children. I noticed, Richard said dryly. She seems to know things she shouldn't. Personal details about my life. Sarah's posture stiffened. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. Your daughter knew about private moments from my past that no one could have told her. I want to know how. Sarah sank onto the edge of a chair, looking tired. Mr. Harrington, I don't know how Lily knows the things she knows. She's always been different, perceptive in ways I can't explain, but I assure you, I haven't been feeding her information about you. You worked for my company, Richard said, wheeling closer, 3 years ago. Yes, customer service. I was laid off during the restructuring after your accident. Did you know who I was then? Of course, everyone at TechVision knew who Richard Harrington was. A hint of bitterness crept into her voice. Though I doubt you knew who any of us were. Richard couldn't argue with that. Where has Lily been these past few days? He asked. Sarah's expression clouded. She's sick, a fever that won't break. The doctor says it's just a virus, but... She trailed off, visibly worried. But? Richard prompted. Sarah met his gaze directly. She keeps talking about you. In her fever. Saying she needs to help you, that she promised you a miracle. A chill ran through Richard. Ms. Thompson, I never asked your daughter for anything. She came to me. I know. That's why I'm here. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Harrington, Lily is a special child. She sees things, knows things that sometimes even I can't explain, but she's never been fixated on someone like this before. What does she want from me? Sarah shook her head. It's not about what she wants from you. In Lily's mind, it's about what you need from her. And what's that? Healing, Sarah said simply. Not just physical. She thinks your soul is in pain. Richard barked a laugh. My soul? I didn't realize your daughter was also a theologian. Sarah didn't rise to the bait. Lily believes everyone deserves kindness, even billionaires in wheelchairs who think they're beyond help. The statement, delivered without malice but with unflinching directness, left Richard momentarily speechless. Ms. Thompson, please call me Sarah. Sarah, Richard amended, I appreciate your concern for your daughter. But I assure you, I'm not in need of spiritual guidance from a 6-year-old. She's very stubborn, Sarah said with a small smile. Gets that from me, I'm afraid, once she sets her mind to something. Like breaking into secured estates? Sarah winced. I've spoken to her about that. She won't be trespassing again. Richard found himself unexpectedly disappointed. She's really that ill? The fever comes and goes. The doctor isn't concerned yet, but... Sarah hesitated. She keeps asking for you, says she needs to give you something important. Richard was surprised by his own response. I could visit her, if you think it might help. Sarah's eyebrows rose in obvious surprise. You would do that? Visit a sick child in our... Well, our apartment isn't exactly up to your standards, Mr. Harrington. Richard, he corrected automatically. And yes, I would. Your daughter has. Intrigued me. Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right. But not today. She's finally sleeping. Perhaps tomorrow. I have the afternoon shift, but I could meet you at our apartment around 10 a.m. I'll be there, Richard said. Margaret can drive me. After providing her address, Sarah stood to leave, then paused. Richard, there's something you should know about our apartment building. What's that? It was built by a subsidiary of TechVision Developments 8 years ago. Richard frowned. That's not possible. TechVision never had a real estate division. Not officially. It was called Horizon Living, a pilot project in affordable housing that was abandoned after negative press about substandard materials. Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. Just thought you should know, since you'll be visiting tomorrow. Richard, you're not thinking clearly. Ben Cooper's voice had an edge to it. He stood by the window in Richard's study, afternoon sunlight casting his shadow across the floor. These accusations are completely unfounded. Richard kept his expression neutral. The stone from Cannon Beach sat in his pocket, a reminder of his promise to Lily. They're not accusations, Ben. They're questions. Questions about discrepancies I've found in TechVision's financial records. Ben turned, his tailored suit unable to hide his tension. Discrepancies. You've been out of the loop for 3 years. What might look like discrepancies to you are simply new operating procedures. New procedures that funnel company funds through shell corporations? Richard raised an eyebrow. Entities that, coincidentally, you have controlling interest in. A flicker of something, surprise, fear, crossed Ben's face before his businessman's mask slipped back into place. That's absurd and offensive. Is it? Richard wheeled himself to his desk and picked up a blue folder, the exact color Lily had mentioned. Because the documents you want me to sign today would give you unilateral control over TechVision's acquisition strategy, including the ability to sell off divisions without board approval. Ben's laugh was forced. It's a standard efficiency measure. The board has already preliminarily approved it. We just need your signature as majority shareholder. Funny thing about being stuck in a wheelchair, Richard said conversationally. People assume your brain is as damaged as your legs. They think you're not paying attention, That you don't care anymore. No one thinks that. You thought that, Ben. Richard's voice hardened. You counted on it. On my isolation, my depression after the accident. You've been systematically looting my company for 3 years, thinking I was too broken to notice. Ben's professional demeanor cracked slightly. This is paranoia, Richard. Maybe you should talk to Dr. Mitchell about adjusting your medication. I spoke with Emma yesterday, Richard continued. She reminded me of something interesting. You were supposed to join us the weekend of my accident. Last-minute business kept you away. What are you implying? Ben's voice had dropped dangerously low. I'm not implying anything. I'm wondering why the brake lines on my car failed on a vehicle that had just been serviced the week before. I'm wondering why you were so quick to restructure the company while I was still in intensive care. I'm wondering why Sarah Thompson, who filed an internal complaint about irregular financial practices, was among the first employees terminated. Ben's face had gone pale. You're connecting dots that don't exist, Richard. Maybe. Richard tossed the blue folder onto his desk. Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. Either way, I won't be signing these documents, and tomorrow I'll be attending the board meeting in person. You can't be serious. Ben's composure was fully shattered now. Richard, you haven't left this house except for medical appointments in 3 years. The board will see this as a mental health episode. Perhaps, Richard acknowledged, or perhaps they'll be interested in the audit I've commissioned from an independent firm. An audit focusing specifically on the financial irregularities I've identified. Ben's expression shifted from shock to calculation. Richard, let's not be hasty. Whatever concerns you have, we can address them privately. There's every need, Richard said firmly. TechVision was built on innovation and integrity. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. It's time to course correct. Ben studied him for a long moment. This isn't like you, Richard. The Richard I know is pragmatic, not idealistic. What's changed? What, indeed? Richard thought of Lily Thompson, of her strange insights and her simple certainty. Let's just say I've gained some perspective, he said finally. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have preparations to make for tomorrow's meeting. Ben straightened his tie, visibly regrouping. Think carefully about this, Richard. You've been out of the game a long time. Business is different now. The board respects what you built, but they've grown accustomed to my leadership. I'm sure they have, Richard agreed pleasantly. We'll see if that holds when they learn about Horizon Living and the other projects you've buried. Ben's eyes narrowed. Careful, Richard. You don't want to make an enemy of me. Too late, Richard replied, meeting his gaze steadily. I think we've been enemies for some time. I just didn't realize it until now. After Ben left, his departure marked by the squeal of expensive tires, Richard sat in silence, processing the confrontation. Ben's reaction had confirmed his suspicions. The question now was how deep the corruption went, and whether Richard had enough evidence to convince the board. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Thompson. Lily's fever is back. She's asking for you. Richard felt an immediate concern that surprised him with its intensity. I'll come right away, he texted back, then called for Margaret to prepare the car. During the drive, Richard found himself clutching the stone from Cannon Beach, drawing comfort from its smooth surface. In just a few days, Lily had somehow become important to him, this strange, insightful child who saw through his carefully constructed walls. Sarah met him at the door, worry etched in her face. Thank you for coming so quickly. The doctor says it's nothing serious, but her fever keeps spiking. Richard followed her to Lily's room, where the little girl lay curled on her side, her cheeks flushed with fever. She stirred when Richard wheeled himself to her bedside. Mr. Harrington, she murmured, her voice weak but her eyes brightening. You didn't sign the papers. No, I didn't. he confirmed, again struck by her inexplicable knowledge. "How are you feeling, Lily?" "Tired." She struggled to sit up and Sarah gently helped her. "But I need to tell you something important." "Lily, you should rest," Sarah admonished gently. "After?" Lily insisted, her gaze fixed on Richard. "Mr. Harrington, you need to go to the lighthouse." Richard blinked in surprise. "Cannon Beach? Why?" "Because that's where you'll find your miracle." Lily's voice was earnest despite her weakness. "Promise me you'll go." The boardroom fell silent as Richard wheeled himself in, every eye fixed on him with varying degrees of surprise. He hadn't entered this room in 3 years, but now he navigated to the head of the table with quiet confidence. "Richard," Ben recovered first, his smile not reaching his eyes, "we weren't expecting you in person." "Clearly," Richard replied dryly, noting the empty space where a chair should have been. "I trust someone can find a place for me." There was an awkward shuffle as staff rearranged the seating. Richard observed the board members, some familiar faces, some new appointments since his withdrawal from active management. "While we're getting settled," Richard continued, "I've added an agenda item, a review of certain financial practices that have come to my attention." Ben's smile froze. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Richard, but any concerns should be addressed privately before bringing them to the full board." "I disagree," Richard said pleasantly. "These matters directly affect TechVision's integrity and future. The board should be fully informed." As the meeting progressed through routine matters, Richard watched Ben carefully. His former friend maintained his composure, but Richard caught the subtle signs of stress. The too frequent sip of water, the slight tightening around his eyes. Finally, they reached Richard's added agenda item. "Over the past week," Richard began, "I've conducted a preliminary review of TechVision's operations during my absence from active management. What I've found concerns me deeply." He tapped his tablet, and financial charts appeared on the screen. "These figures show systematic diversion of company resources through shell corporations, entities ultimately controlled by individuals in this room." A murmur ran through the board members. Ben leaned forward. "Richard, these are serious allegations without context. Perhaps you're misinterpreting." "I'm not finished," Richard cut him off firmly. "Beyond financial irregularities, I've uncovered evidence of ethical breaches that expose TechVision to significant liability. The Horizon Living project is just one example." He switched to photos of the Thompson apartment building, highlighting structural issues and code violations. "This is what happens when we prioritize profit over people. When we forget the values that built this company." "That project was terminated years ago," Ben interjected. "Ancient history." "Not to the families still living in dangerous conditions," Richard countered. "And not to the courts when they learned TechVision knew about these issues and did nothing." For the next 30 minutes, Richard methodically presented his findings. Some board members looked shocked. Others, Richard noted, seemed unsurprised, perhaps complicit. "In conclusion," Richard said finally, "I'm calling for a full independent audit of TechVision's operations over the past 3 years. During this process, I'll be resuming active leadership as CEO." Ben stood abruptly. "This is absurd. Richard has been completely disconnected from the business for years. His understanding of modern market realities is outdated at best, delusional at worst." "My understanding of ethical business practices hasn't changed, Ben," Richard replied evenly. "Neither has my majority shareholding in this company." A tense silence followed as board members exchanged glances, calculating where their interests lay. Richard waited, outwardly calm though his heart raced. Elaine Johnston, the longest-serving board member, cleared her throat. "I move that we approve Mr. Harrington's proposal for an independent audit, effective immediately." Several voices seconded the motion. Ben looked around the table, his expression darkening as he realized he was losing control of the situation. "This isn't over, Richard," he said quietly, as the board voted overwhelmingly to approve the audit. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Actually," Richard replied, "for the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing." By the time his driver returned him to his mansion, Richard felt drained in a way he hadn't experienced since his rehabilitation days. Margaret met him at the door. "You look exhausted, Mr. Harrington. Shall I prepare your medication?" "No," Richard decided. "Just some tea, please. And I'd like to know if there's any message from Sarah Thompson about Lily's condition." "Ms. Thompson called an hour ago," Margaret confirmed. "Lily's fever has broken again. The doctor says it's a persistent virus, but nothing to be alarmed about." Relief washed over Richard. "Good. That's good." His phone buzzed with an incoming call, a number he didn't recognize. "Richard Harrington," he answered. "Mr. Harrington, this is Dr. Reynolds from Pacific Children's Hospital." A woman's voice, professional but urgent. "I'm calling about Lily Thompson." Richard's grip tightened on his phone. "What's happened?" "Ms. Thompson gave us your number as an emergency contact. Lily's been admitted with a high fever and concerning symptoms. We're running tests now, but I wanted to inform you as requested." "I'll be right there," Richard said immediately. "Where exactly is she?" After getting the details, Richard called for his driver again. The drive to the hospital seemed interminable, his mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. At the hospital, he found Sarah pacing outside a room, her face drawn with worry. "Richard," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you for coming." "What happened?" he asked, wheeling closer. Sarah ran a hand through her disheveled hair. "The fever came back worse than before. She was delirious, talking about you and the lighthouse. When she started having trouble breathing, I brought her to the emergency room." "What are the doctors saying?" "They don't know yet. They're running blood tests, checking for infections." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "They mentioned they're testing for some rare conditions too, autoimmune disorders, environmental toxins." Richard felt a chill at the mention of toxins, remembering the evidence he'd uncovered about TechVision's cost-cutting measures, the substandard materials used in projects like Horizon Living. "Can I see her?" he asked. Sarah nodded, leading him to where Lily lay in a hospital bed that seemed far too large for her small frame. Monitors beeped steadily, an IV line running into her arm. Despite her pallor, her eyes brightened when she saw Richard. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did," Richard said, wheeling to her bedside. "Your mother says you're not feeling well." Lily's smile was weak but determined. "It's okay. This is part of it." "Part of what?" Richard asked gently. "The miracle." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact despite her condition. "Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better." Richard exchanged a worried glance with Sarah. "Lily, you should focus on getting well. Don't worry about miracles or lighthouses." Lily shook her head slightly. "You still don't understand, but you will on Sunday." Her eyes drifted closed. "You promised to go." "I will," Richard assured her, surprised by how much he meant it. "I promised. As Lily dozed off, Richard quietly ordered environmental testing for the Thompson apartment building. If his company, if he, was responsible for Lily's illness, he needed to know, and he needed to fix it. "I'll take care of everything," he promised Sarah. For the first time since his accident, Richard was looking forward to tomorrow. Not dreading it, not enduring it, actively anticipating it. Perhaps that in itself was the beginning of a miracle. Sunday dawned clear, the kind of perfect Oregon day that seemed almost deliberately orchestrated. Richard sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's modest sedan, watching the coastline emerge as they rounded the final bend toward Cannon Beach. "We're almost there," Sarah said, glancing at him. "How are you feeling?" "Ridiculous," Richard admitted. "A 58-year-old man chasing a child's fantasy." Sarah smiled. That 58-year-old man also upended his entire company and faced down his corrupt partner because of that same child's insight. Richard couldn't argue. The past 48 hours had been a whirlwind. Emergency board meetings, press statements about the leadership transition, and preliminary findings from the environmental testing confirming dangerous levels of industrial chemicals in the Thompson apartment building. "Any update on Lily's condition?" he asked. "Stable," Sarah replied. "The new medication seems to be helping. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." They fell silent as the iconic Haystack Rock came into view, standing sentinel over the beach. "There's the lighthouse," Sarah pointed to the white structure perched on the headland. "I remember," Richard said softly. 25 years ago, he'd climbed those steps with Emma, a ring burning a hole in his pocket, his future seemingly limitless. "How do you want to do this?" Sarah asked as she parked. "The lighthouse isn't exactly wheelchair accessible." "I came prepared," Richard said, pointing to the all-terrain wheelchair he'd had delivered overnight. "It's designed for beach access." Sarah helped him transfer into the specialized chair. "Lily said you had to go alone. I'll wait here." The beach was relatively quiet, just a few families scattered along its expanse. Richard's wheelchair moved surprisingly well over the packed sand near the water's edge, allowing him to make steady progress toward the lighthouse trail. As he approached the base of the headland, Richard realized the true challenge lay ahead. The path included steps his chair couldn't navigate. "Need a hand?" A voice startled him. A man in his 30s stood nearby. "Saw you looking up at the lighthouse. There's actually a service road around back. I work there. I could show you." Richard hesitated, then remembered Lily's certainty. That would be very helpful. The man, Tom, led Richard to a concealed service road that wound gently up the headland. The gradient was manageable in Richard's chair, though it required effort. "You picked a perfect day," Tom commented. "The view is spectacular." Richard barely heard him, focused on the physical exertion, the first real challenge he'd embraced since his accident. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his arms burning with the effort. But with each push, something shifted inside him, a reminder that while his legs might be useless, the rest of him wasn't. They reached the lighthouse plateau, and Richard paused, breathing hard, but with a sense of accomplishment. "I'll give you some space," Tom said, sensing Richard's need for solitude. Alone now, Richard wheeled himself to the railing overlooking the ocean. The view was indeed spectacular, endless blue stretching to the horizon, sunlight dancing on the waves. This was where he'd asked Emma to marry him, where he'd once been truly happy, full of ambition and love and dreams that seemed boundless. "I'm here, Lily," he whispered to the wind. "Now what?" Only the cry of seagulls answered him. Richard wasn't sure what he'd expected, a sign, a revelation, perhaps even the promised miracle. Instead, there was just the sun, the sea, and his own reflection. But as the minutes passed, something subtle shifted. The tightness in his chest loosened. The bitterness that had been his constant companion for 3 years seemed to dissolve in the salt air. For the first time since his accident, Richard felt peace, not resignation, not the numbness he'd mistaken for acceptance, but genuine peace. He sat there for over an hour, watching the rhythm of the waves, remembering not just the man he'd been when he proposed to Emma, but the boy who'd dreamed of building things that mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Everything okay?" "Yes," he typed back. "Coming down now." As he navigated back down the service road, Richard felt lighter somehow. The miracle Lily had promised hadn't materialized, but he wasn't disappointed. The hospital corridor seemed longer than Richard remembered, his wheelchair moving with purpose toward Lily's room. The stone from Cannon Beach sat in his pocket, a tangible reminder of his experience at the lighthouse. Sarah had gone ahead while Richard spoke with Dr. Reynolds about additional specialists. As he approached the room, he heard urgent voices and quickened his pace. Two nurses rushed past him into Lily's room. Richard's heart clenched as he caught sight of Sarah's pale face, her hand pressed against the glass observation window. "What's happening?" he demanded, wheeling to her side. Her fever spiked suddenly. Sarah's voice trembled. "They're trying to bring it down." Through the window, Richard could see medical staff surrounding Lily's small form, attaching new monitors, administering medication. "Mr. Harrington." Dr. Reynolds emerged from the room, her expression grave. "Lily's condition has deteriorated. The toxins in her system are affecting her liver function now." "What does she need?" Richard asked immediately. "We're stabilizing her, but she requires specialized treatment. There's a pediatric toxicology unit in Baltimore that has experience with these specific compounds." "Make the arrangements," Richard interrupted. "Whatever it costs. My plane can be ready within hours." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "I'll coordinate with their team." Inside the room, the immediate crisis appeared to be resolving. The nurses stepped back, one adjusting Lily's IV while another documented vitals. Sarah turned to Richard, conflict evident in her eyes. "I can't accept—" "Yes, you can," Richard said firmly. "This isn't charity, Sarah. It's responsibility. My company created this situation. The testing isn't conclusive yet. I don't need more tests to know what's right," Richard insisted. "Please, let me do this." Sarah studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Thank you." They were allowed into the room once Lily was stabilized. She looked frighteningly small against the hospital sheets, her normally vibrant presence diminished by illness. Her eyes fluttered open as Richard approached. "You went to the lighthouse," she whispered. "I did," Richard confirmed, taking her small hand in his. "Just as I promised." A smile ghosted across Lily's pale face. "Did you find it?" "I find what?" "Your miracle." Richard hesitated, then placed the stone from Cannon Beach beside her pillow. "I found this, and I found clarity." Lily's smile widened slightly. "That's part of it." "Part of what?" "The healing," Lily murmured, her eyes drifting closed again. "Not done yet." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair. "Rest now, sweetheart. You're going on a trip to see some special doctors." As Lily dozed off, Richard's phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. "Urgent news regarding Ben Cooper. Call immediately." Richard excused himself to the hallway. His assistant's voice was tight with controlled excitement when he called. "Sir, the forensic accountants found something in Ben's personal communications, evidence that he may have been directly involved in your accident." Richard's breath caught. "What kind of evidence?" "Emails to a mechanic sent the week before your crash. They reference adjustments to your car that would solve the leadership problem." The accountants found them while investigating financial records. Ben paid this mechanic from a shell company account. Cold realization washed over Richard. "He tried to kill me." "It appears so, sir. The FBI has been notified. They're seeking a warrant now." Richard ended the call, his mind racing. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. Ben's absence the weekend of the accident, his immediate restructuring of the company, his systematic dismantling of everything Richard had built. He wheeled himself back to Lily's room, working to compose his expression. This wasn't the time to burden Sarah with this revelation. "Everything all right?" Sarah asked, noting his distraction. "Just company matters," Richard replied. "The arrangements for Baltimore are underway. My plane will be ready by evening." The Tech Vision headquarters lobby fell silent as Richard wheeled himself through the main entrance for the first time in 3 years. Employees froze. Conversations halted mid-sentence, all eyes following his deliberate progress toward the elevators. The past 48 hours had been a whirlwind. Ben Cooper had been arrested, charged with financial crimes and attempted murder. The evidence recovered from his communications and financial records was damning. Not just the tampered brake lines on Richard's car, but years of systematic fraud and corruption. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. Richard's former, now current again, assistant Claire gasped when she saw him. "Mr. Harrington!" "We weren't expecting you until the afternoon meeting." "Plans change, Claire," Richard said, a hint of his old decisiveness returning. "Please call the executive team to the main conference room, immediately." Within 30 minutes, TechVision's leadership team sat around the conference table, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity on their faces. Some were familiar to Richard, others had been appointed during his absence. "For those I haven't met," Richard began, "I'm Richard Harrington. 3 years ago, I founded this company with a vision of technology that improves lives. Somewhere along the way, under Ben Cooper's leadership, that vision was corrupted." He wheeled himself to the head of the table. "As of today, we're course-correcting, dramatically." For the next hour, Richard outlined his plan, a complete overhaul of TechVision's corporate structure and ethical guidelines. Increased transparency, accountability at every level, and most urgently, a comprehensive remediation program for all those harmed by the company's negligence. "The Horizon Living developments will be our first priority," Richard concluded. "Every resident will be relocated to safe housing at our expense, while the buildings are either renovated or demolished and rebuilt." "The cost would be astronomical," protested the CFO, a Cooper appointee named Daniels. "Shareholders will revolt." "Let them," Richard said firmly. "I still hold controlling interest, and I'd rather rebuild this company right than continue profiting from harm." He could see the shock on their faces. This wasn't the Richard Harrington they remembered, the ruthless businessman who prioritized growth above all else. "For those uncomfortable with this new direction," Richard continued, "severance packages are available. For those who stay, I expect full commitment to our new mission." By day's end, 3 executives had resigned. Richard viewed this as progress. In his newly reclaimed office, Richard connected via video call to Sarah in Baltimore. Lily had been admitted to the specialized unit, already undergoing advanced treatment protocols. "How is she?" Richard asked, studying Sarah's tired face on the screen. "Stable," Sarah replied. "The doctors here are amazing. They've seen these toxin combinations before. Apparently there was a similar case involving materials from another development company." Richard nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, TechVision wasn't the only corporation cutting corners, but we may have been the worst." "The lead physician wants to talk with your environmental testing team," Sarah said. "Something about treatment protocols, being specific to the exact chemical compounds." "I'll arrange it immediately," Richard promised. "Sarah, I want you to know that I'm doing everything possible to make this right. Not just for Lily, but for everyone affected." Sarah's expression softened. "I believe you. The Richard Harrington that Lily saw from the beginning, he's really there, isn't he?" Richard considered this. Perhaps he always was, just buried under ambition and then bitterness. "Well, I'm glad he's resurfaced," Sarah said with a small smile. "Lily will be too when she's more alert." After ending the call, Richard wheeled himself to the window overlooking the city. 3 years ago, from a similar window, he'd surveyed his domain with pride and ambition. Now, he saw it differently, not as an empire, but as a responsibility. The Baltimore hospital was a maze of corridors and specialized units, but Richard navigated it with determination, a bouquet of sunflowers balanced on his lap. After a week of intensive work restructuring TechVision and cooperating with federal investigators on Ben's case, he'd finally managed to fly east. He found Sarah in the family lounge outside the pediatric toxicology unit, her face lighting up with surprise when she saw him. "Richard, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I caught an earlier flight," he explained, suddenly self-conscious about the flowers. These are for Lily, if they're allowed, Sarah smiled. They're perfect. She's having a good day. The doctors are cautiously optimistic about her latest test results. She led him to Lily's room, a cheerful space despite the medical equipment. Lily was sitting up in bed, coloring in a book. She looked up as they entered, her face breaking into a wide smile that transformed her from patient to simply a happy child. "Mr. Harrington, you came." "Of course I did," Richard said, wheeling himself to her bedside. "And please call me Richard." Lily considered this, head tilted. "Okay, Richard. Did you bring me something?" Sarah started to admonish her, but Richard laughed. "As a matter of fact, I did." He presented the sunflowers, which Lily accepted with delight. "They're like little suns," she declared. "Mom, can we put them where I can see them from my bed?" As Sarah arranged the flowers in a vase, Richard studied Lily. Her color was better than when he'd last seen her, though she still looked fragile against the hospital bedding. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better," Lily said confidently. "The doctors here know exactly what medicines I need, and they're helping other kids from our building too." Richard nodded. "Yes, we've arranged for everyone from Horizon Living Developments to receive proper medical screening and treatment." "That's part of your miracle," Lily said matter-of-factly, "helping people instead of hurting them." The simple observation struck Richard deeply. "I suppose it is." "Have you been walking yet?" Lily asked suddenly. Sarah looked mortified. "Lily, that's not an appropriate question." But Richard wasn't offended. "No, Lily, my spine is still damaged. That hasn't changed." Lily frowned slightly. "But you went to the lighthouse. You found the stone." "I did," Richard confirmed, pulling the Cannon Beach pebble from his pocket. "And I found perspective, peace perhaps, but not the ability to walk." Lily shook her head, undeterred. "You're not listening properly. The miracle isn't finished yet." Before Richard could respond, a doctor entered. Dr. Patel, the specialist overseeing Lily's treatment. After introductions, she shared encouraging news about Lily's progress. "The targeted treatment is working well. The toxins are clearing from her system more rapidly than we anticipated. If this continues, we might be looking at discharge within 2 weeks." "That's wonderful," Sarah said, visible relief washing over her. "Indeed," Dr. Patel agreed, "though we'll need to ensure she doesn't return to the contaminated environment." "That's been taken care of," Richard assured her. "All residents are being permanently relocated. The buildings will be demolished." Indeed, after the doctor left, Sarah excused herself to make some calls, leaving Richard alone with Lily. "I brought you something else," Richard said, reaching into his briefcase. He withdrew a folder containing architectural renderings. "I wanted your opinion on these." "The board is waiting, Mr. Harrington." Claire's voice brought Richard back to the present moment. He nodded, straightening his tie before wheeling himself into the boardroom. The faces that greeted him were a mixture of Tech Vision veterans and new appointees, a carefully balanced team Richard had assembled over the past month. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Today marks a significant milestone in Tech Vision's recovery and renewal." The projector displayed the comprehensive plan they'd developed, the Horizon Remediation Initiative. Not just replacing contaminated buildings, but creating sustainable communities with integrated healthcare facilities, educational resources, and green technology. The total investment will be $2.7 billion over 5 years, Richard concluded. A significant commitment, but one that reflects our responsibility to those harmed and our vision for the future. Barbara Chen, the new CFO, nodded. "The financial models show we can sustain this investment while maintaining core operations. It will impact shareholder returns in the short term, but enhance our reputation and stability long term. More importantly," Richard added, "it's the right thing to do." The vote was unanimous. As the meeting concluded, Richard felt a sense of accomplishment, unlike any he'd experienced in his business career. This wasn't about profit or market dominance. It was about healing, making amends. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Great news! Doctors have cleared Lily for discharge tomorrow." Richard smiled, sending back his congratulations. Over the past month, he'd traveled to Baltimore every weekend, watching Lily grow stronger, her vibrant personality re-emerging as the toxins left her system. And with each visit, his connection with Sarah had deepened, dinners extending into long conversations, shared concerns evolving into shared hopes. "Claire," he called as he returned to his office, "please clear my schedule for the next few days. I need to fly to Baltimore tomorrow." "Already done, sir," she replied with a knowing smile. "The jet is on standby for a morning departure." That evening, as Richard prepared for his trip, his home phone rang, a rare occurrence, as few people had that number. "Richard Harrington," he answered. "Mr. Harrington, this is Dr. Mitchell." The voice of his longtime neurologist was instantly recognizable. "I've been reviewing the new imaging from your latest exam, and something unusual has appeared." Richard tensed. "Unusual how?" "There's activity in the damaged areas of your spine that wasn't present before. Minimal, but definite." "What does that mean?" Richard asked, his heart suddenly racing. "I'm not entirely sure," Dr. Mitchell admitted. "It could be an anomaly in the imaging, but if it's not, there might be regeneration occurring." Richard gripped the phone tighter. "Are you saying I might walk again?" "I'm saying it's worth exploring further," the doctor emphasized. "I'd like to consult with some colleagues at Mayo Clinic. There's experimental work being done that might be applicable to your case." After arranging to meet with Dr. Mitchell upon his return from Baltimore, Richard sat in silence, processing this unexpected development. Was this what Lily had meant? Was this the miracle she'd promised? The next day, Richard arrived at the Baltimore hospital just as Lily was completing her discharge process. She squealed with delight when she saw him, actually running, to greet him with a hug. "Richard, you came for my going-away party." "I wouldn't miss it," he assured her, amazed at her transformation from the frail child he'd first visited. Sarah approached more sedately, but her smile was equally warm. "This is a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you until later." "I wanted to be here for the big moment," Richard explained, presenting Lily with a small gift bag, a going-home present. Inside was a snow globe containing a miniature lighthouse, Cannon Beach captured in glass and water. Lily's eyes widened with delight. "It's the miracle place," she exclaimed, shaking it to create a flurry of white particles. "Look, Mom, it's even got tiny stones on the beach." The Oregon coast gleamed under a perfect summer sky. Cannon Beach stretching out below the lighthouse plateau where Richard sat in his wheelchair. The specialized beach chair had become a familiar companion over the past 6 months, enabling him to access places he'd once thought lost to him forever. "Ready?" Dr. Patel asked, standing beside him with Sarah. Richard nodded, taking a deep breath. The experimental therapy had shown promising results, not a full restoration of function, but significant improvement. Today would be the first test outside the controlled environment of the rehabilitation center. "Lily, would you bring the walking frame, please?" Sarah called. Lily, now 7 and completely recovered from her illness, proudly carried the lightweight support frame to Richard's side. "Here you go." "Thank you," Richard said, smiling at her barely contained excitement. She'd been insisting for months that this day would come, that the lighthouse was where the miracle would be completed. With Sarah and Dr. Patel positioning themselves on either side, Richard carefully transferred from the wheelchair to a standing position, gripping the frame for support. His legs trembled with the effort, but held. "Well done," Dr. Patel encouraged. "Remember, small steps, There's no rush. Richard focused on the techniques he'd practiced for countless hours, shifting weight, engaging the partially regenerated neural pathways, using the frame for balance rather than full support. His right foot moved forward, then his left. Shaky, uncertain steps, but steps nonetheless. Lily clapped her hands in delight. "You're doing it! You're walking!" Richard managed 3 more steps before needing to rest, lowering himself onto a bench Sarah had positioned nearby. The exertion left him breathing hard, but exhilarated. "That was excellent," Dr. Patel said, checking his vitals. "Better than I expected for the first outdoor attempt." Sarah squeezed his shoulder, her eyes bright with emotion. "How does it feel?" "Exhausting," Richard admitted with a laugh, "but incredible." Lily stood before him, her expression serious despite the joy in her eyes. "See, I told you there would be a miracle." "You did," Richard acknowledged, "though I don't think either of us expected it quite like this." The experimental treatment had been discovered through a serendipitous connection. Dr. Mitchell's colleague at Mayo Clinic had been collaborating with a researcher funded by Tech Vision's new Medical Innovation Division. The therapy combined electrical stimulation with a novel regenerative approach, targeting Richard's specific type of spinal injury. He would never regain full function. The damage had been too severe, the intervention too delayed. But the ability to stand, to take limited steps with support, to feel sensation in his previously numb legs, these were outcomes no specialist had thought possible 3 years post-injury. "Let's try once more," Richard suggested after resting, to the railing. This time, Lily positioned herself before him, walking backward as he advanced with the frame. "Just follow me," she instructed solemnly. "Like I followed you that first day." Richard laughed at the memory. This confident child had indeed simply walked into his life and changed everything. Later, as they prepared to leave, Richard found himself alone with Lily for a moment while Sarah packed their picnic. "Lily," he said quietly, "there's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time. How did you know? About the lighthouse, about Ben, about everything?" Lily considered the question with unusual seriousness. "I just know things sometimes, especially when people need help." "And you knew I needed help?" She nodded. "Your picture was in Mom's old work stuff. You looked so sad, even though you were smiling. And then I had a dream about the lighthouse, and you were there, but different, happy." Richard marveled at the simplicity of her explanation, part intuition, part childlike certainty, perhaps something more that defied rational understanding. "Well, thank you," he said finally, "for seeing what I needed, even when I didn't." Lily beamed at him. "That's what family does." Family. The word resonated deeply. From isolated recluse to part of this small, extraordinary family in just 6 months. As they drove back to Portland, Richard seated beside Sarah while Lily dozed in the back. He thought about the journey ahead, the ring in his pocket, waiting for the right moment. None of it would have happened without a child's belief in miracles, and her willingness to offer one in exchange